All right, so let's start over. So even though typically this class is reserved for a Torah portion, where we do the Pardes, the orchard of Torah, but sometimes I feel like there's clearly a calling to a different topic, and this today is one of those situations because tonight, and for already in parts of the world, they are celebrating Lag BaOmer, the 18th of Iyar, the festive day of Lag BaOmer. So I do want to talk about Lag BaOmer. Let's close the door here. I was interviewed yesterday by the local Jewish newspaper, and one of the questions they asked me, as part of an Ask the Rabbi series they're doing, so one of the questions they asked me was, "What is your favorite holiday?" And and to be honest, I said, it's like asking which is your favorite child. You have holidays. One of the beautiful elements of Judaism, especially with the lens of Hasidic Judaism, is that every holiday really has an energy and a message which is unparalleled. And therefore, it's not cliche to say every holiday is my favorite, because really there is something that every holiday has that no other holiday does. And therefore, when it comes to that holiday, you really have to anticipate it and celebrate it as if, and it should be, your favorite holiday. And that's certainly true about the major holidays. You have Purim and Pesach and Sukkot and Hanukkah. But even minor holidays, like earlier this week, we had Pesach Sheni, second Passover. Tonight we have Lag BaOmer. You have those holidays are also really exciting days. The only thing is you have to work to access the excitement. You have to study it to be able to appreciate what makes this holiday so exciting. Lag BaOmer is a really remarkable day. And there's statements among the sages, certainly in the more mystical world, how there's something about Lag BaOmer which is truly unparalleled. And so let's talk a little bit about Lag BaOmer, what it is, what makes it a special day. And I'm going to be using the Sefer. It's called, well, I guess it's blurred out, but it's Sefer HaTodah, the book of our heritage, which I'm reading in Hebrew, but it also exists in English. And it goes through the days of the year. And this shares the various elements of Lag BaOmer and what makes it so special. Granted, this year, Lag BaOmer has within it a certain bitter-sweet element as we commemorate the one-year anniversary of the terrible tragedy that took place on Lag BaOmer in Meron, really unparalleled from what I could remember as far as tragedies. Look, we're no stranger to tragedies, but this was just different. It was different because it was a tragedy that took place within the holiness. It was in the holiest place, a place of celebration. It wasn't from some sort of evil outside force of terrorism which came in. It was just everything about it was so painful, and that was 1 year ago tonight. And so, there is that bittersweet element, but I will address that too and see maybe Lag BaOmer conveys a comforting message for that as well. So let's get to the basics, and then we'll see how deep we can go. Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer is the 18th day of Iyar, which again is tonight, the 33rd day of counting the Omer. Lag is Lamed Gimel, is the shorthand version of 33. It is the day, Yom Hilula. Now, it's called Yom Hilula Shel Rashbi. It is called the day of celebration of the Rashbi, of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, which is strange because it's the day that he passed away. Why would the day of, it's bizarre that the day of his passing is referred to as his day of celebration. I am muting all just so that we avoid unintended sounds. If anybody has any questions or comments, please feel free to unmute yourself and pose your question or comment. Anyway, so why would the day of Rabbi Shimon's passing be referred to as a day of celebration? And yet it is. And it's a day of great festivity. We don't say Tachanun. Tachanun are the prayers of connected to sin. In other words, the prayers where we ask forgiveness for sin. On any day of celebration, we avoid those prayers. We don't want to bring up sin. It's a day in which it's a very popular day to get married. It's a day in which we have haircuts, and specifically the first haircut of a child, which is when they turn, of a boy that is, when they turn 3 years old. There's a tradition in many circles to wait until a child is 3 years old before cutting their hair. And so therefore, being that for the last 33 days, we didn't cut our hair because of the Omer, so now is an opportune time to cut hair. My first haircut happened on Lag BaOmer many, many hundreds of years ago. So this is the tradition of cutting one's hair, of weddings, all on Lag BaOmer. One should wear new, nice clothing. Tonight and tomorrow, put on a nice outfit. Make sure to wear clean, nice, ideally, depending on the setting you have to go to. But ideally, one should put on festive clothing. We add candles in the synagogue. This perhaps is more relevant in earlier days where festive days were celebrated by lighting more candles in synagogue. Today, I don't know how relevant that concept is. Children and their teachers go out to the fields. They take bows and arrows, and they play with the bows and arrows in joyous, festive ways. This is all the custom of Lag BaOmer. And he goes on to say, this is true everywhere. How much more so at Meron? How much more so at the burial place of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in northern Israel, Meron, where Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is buried along with his son, Rabbi Eliezer. And as he says over here, one who has not seen the great joy of Lag BaOmer Meron has not seen the pillar of light of joy, period. A lot of people go there on this day to sanctify themselves and to purify themselves with the holiness of Torah and prayer. I want to and again, all of this, there's let's be honest, as we speak of this, there is that shadow of what took place last year, but it should not take away from the tradition of festivity, and not only festivity, but the miracles that are said to have happened because of prayers at the gravesite of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai on the anniversary of his passing. I remember when I went to Meron on Lag BaOmer. This is approximately 20 years ago, maybe 19 years ago. And I still remember that year, I believe, again, it was a Thursday night and Friday, like this year, where Lag BaOmer went into Shabbos. And I got there late Thursday night. And as I got off the bus, there was a row of people. This is maybe a few blocks away from the actual gravesite. There was a row of people there with pitchers of water and cups. For anybody who came off the buses, anybody who arrived, they were offering them water and drinks. And someone explained to me afterwards, who are these people? Who are these people who are giving out drinks? So I was told that this is not the volunteer, random volunteers, but rather these are people who had been to the kaver, the gravesite of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai on Lag BaOmer in previous years, and had prayed for a blessing. Many of them praying for a blessing they hadn't seen in many, many years. And that blessing came to fruition. And they attest, and the blessing came to fruition sometimes miraculously, and they credit the holiness of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai on this day. And therefore, as a way of saying thank you, these people in the future years, they go back and they say, let's take care of anybody who comes, any of the guests of Rabbi Shneur Bar Yochai, let us be there to give them drinks so that they're comfortable while they're here, which is fascinating. I saw this firsthand. Again, a row of people each giving out drinks, which is a form of saying thank you that my prayers here were answered. So this is the power of tonight. Now, certainly there's a certain power of the actual location, the gravesite of Shimon Bar Yochai, but it's a power that exists anywhere. Tonight is a night in which, tonight and tomorrow that is a night in which there's an added energy to the world, the energy and the power of Shimon Bar Yochai. We'll talk about it momentarily, but it's an opportunity to give a little bit extra charity and to pray with a little extra intensity. Whatever it is that a person seeks, that prayer is an area in life which he or she is yearning for, tonight and tomorrow, Lag BaOmer, there is an extra power to that prayer. What is the essence of this day? So now let's take a step back. We've been focusing on Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, but actually, Rabbi Shimon, the celebration of Shimon Bar Yochai is the second one in history connected to this day. The first is something else. The first is that it's brought down in the Rishonim that we know that Rabbi Akiva, the great sage Rabbi Akiva, built an academy and attracted 24,000 students. It says Rabbi Akiva had 12,000 pairs of students, which is interesting. Instead of saying 24,000 students, he had 12,000 pairs of students. In other words, each student that came paired up with another. They studied bechavrusa, they studied one-on-one, and their teacher was Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva had 24,000 students, and there was a terrible plague which wiped them out. And the time of year in which they died was this time of year, was right between Pesach and Shavuos. And now, that's what the Talmud says. They died between Pesach and Shavuos. Then the commentaries add several ideas to what, giving a little bit more description to what happened. And there's different opinions of what took place. According to one opinion, they died all within the first 32 days of the Omer. And therefore, today is day number 32, tomorrow's day number 33, in which case tonight is when that plague ended and the students stopped dying. And therefore, we celebrate the fact that they stopped dying. There's other opinions which say that no, unfortunately, the plague continued through the Omer. And it was only that on this day, no one died. So 33rd day of the Omer either was the end of the plague or a pause within the plague. Sadly, the concept of a plague wiping out thousands upon thousands of people is unfortunately much more realistic to us now than maybe it was just a few years ago. So this is the plague which killed his students. Either it stopped on the 33rd day of the Omer, or it was paused on the 33rd day of the Omer. So that is one reason that is given for the first reason which is given for the celebration of Lag BaOmer. However, the second reason, and really the more mystical reason, and the reason which brings more joy, because let's be honest, what type of tremendous joy would one have for the end of a plague? That's kind of a bizarre reason to really celebrate. At best, you could say the end of a plague or the pause in a plague brings about feelings of relief. To say it brings about feelings of celebration is a little bit strange, right? We don't celebrate the end of the Holocaust, even though it ended at a certain day. The liberation of Auschwitz was in the end of January of 1945. I mean, at the very best, you could say it's a painful sense of finally it's over. That's not a reason to celebrate. And that's why the celebration of Lag BaOmer is usually associated with the second reason, which is it is called the day of celebration of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. But that too raises as much a question as the other point, which is it's the day he passed away. What makes it a day of celebration? Especially when you consider that there is a concept that is brought down that when a tzaddik passes away, there is a certain pain. Understandably, there's a pain because there's a pain of loss to the world. And so therefore, there should be, that too should be something which is not commemorative celebration, if anything, with somber reflection. The Gemara famously says that it talks about Miriam, the prophetess. It talks about her dying in the book of Devarim, when the Torah repeats a lot of what transpired in the desert. So the death of Miriam is recorded right next to the episode of Moshe breaking the tablets. Says the Talmud, what's the link? Why does it mention Miriam's death in connection to the breaking of the Luchos? And it says, because Kasha Misasan, because the passing, the death of a tzaddik, like Miriam, tzaddikas, like Miriam, is as painful as the shattering of the Luchos. So accepting that that's the case, again, which is perfectly understandable, then why would the passing of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai be associated with celebration? So both reasons don't seem to line themselves up to be a celebratory day, and yet it is a very festive day, especially for those of us who are in Israel. Not only Meron, we go throughout Israel on Lag BaOmer, there's bonfires, there's festivity throughout the country. And why? It doesn't seem to make sense. So the answer to this question lies in the very unique nature of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Yes, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was one Tana, was one of the great sages of the Mishnah. He lived approximately 100 years after the destruction of the temple, the second temple. So he's a Tana, but he was a very unique Tana, a very unique sage, in some ways towering above even the great sages of his era. And that is because Rav Shimon was the great mystic of his time. And he's the one who authored the Zohar, the secrets of the Torah. Now, granted, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai is not the one who composed the secrets of the Torah. Like the Mishnah, which was authored by Yehuda Nasir, Yehuda was collecting the information which had existed since the time of Moses and putting it into writing. The same is true with Rabbi Shimon. He was collecting the mystical secrets of Judaism, which had been passed on, and he was the gate bearer. He was the one who was the sage of that wisdom. Rabbi Shimon is the author of that Zohar, and he is a tremendous mystical sage. And therefore, when we understand that, we can now review the episode of his passing and see it from a different perspective, a much more mystical perspective. There's no doubt that from a external reality, the passing of anyone is painful and sad. The passing of a righteous person, perhaps even more painful, more sad. But there is something about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai which is different. And I want to share what the sages tell us about the day of his passing. This is the tradition we have about the day that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai passed away, that day. We have a Kabbalah, which means an accepted tradition, that the day of the passing of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was on Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer, the 18th day of Iyar. On that day, the Yom Petiras, on the day of his passing, there was a great light. His home, his yeshiva was filled with a tremendous light, a light that included joy. Why? Because on that day, Rabbi Shneur Bar Yochai knew that this was his last day here on earth. And he gathered his students together. And he said, today, I am going to reveal to you the secrets of Torah, the secrets of life, the secrets of reality, the truths that are elusive. This whole, the very meaning in Hebrew, the word for world is olam. Olam is very connected to the word helam, which means hidden. The word olam, which means world, is closely related to the word hidden, because the world is a reality which hides the truth that is beneath it, that sustains it, that vivifies it. So he said, today is my last day here on earth, and therefore he says, today is the day I'm going to share with you truths and secrets which the world has never seen before. And because of that, there was a light, there was a physical light which filled his room, which filled his home. And he spent that day teaching and sharing and revealing ideas which were then recorded in the Zohar. And the truth is, the world, says the Zohar, was not really worthy of that. Sometimes we get something we're not worthy of. Just like we received the Torah, we weren't really worthy of the Torah. The world in that day was not worthy of the secrets that were shared by Rabbi Shimon. And he and his students, that day was like a wedding day. Yom Hilula. Hilula means a festive wedding day. There was a certain connection. What is so festive about a wedding? A wedding is the festive connection between two souls. That's really what a wedding is. We're celebrating two souls coming together. The connection between two souls. There's something very beautiful about that. And this was a day of deep connection between Rabbi Shimon and his students and the divine truth of Torah of God. There was a connection that was felt between Rabbi Shimon and his students and God that was experienced in that day. That it was called the festive wedding day, a day of deep connection. And the day was lengthened. Well, those, as we know, today is actually one of the longest days of the year, right? We're getting close to. Not one of the longest, whatever. It's the sunset and nightfall now is very late, but it said it extended even further. The day was lengthened so that Rabbi Shimon would have all the time he needed to teach the secrets of Torah to his students. Because this was his final day on earth. That was certain. And by the way, we know that that tzaddik, everything kind of works together, synchronized. So that today is the 18th day of Iyar, and the number 18, as many of you probably know, is connected to life. Chai. Chai is life. Chai is 18. It was on the 18th day of Iyar where Rabbi Shimon gave his soul back and was connected to life. This was the day. And the sun did not set until he revealed all that was given permission to reveal. As soon as he concluded sharing with his students the light, the holiness of Torah, the holiness of the secrets of Torah, that's when he passed away. Shak'a Hashemesh, the sun set. And at that moment, at that time, the soul of Rabbi Shimon ascended upward, the way it's written in the Sefer Idrazuta. And therefore, says the Sefer Idrazuta, for this reason, this day has always been associated with joy. Even though, generally speaking, the day that a tzaddik passes away, that a righteous person passes away, is considered to be a more somber day. It's called a Yom Tanis. It's a day appropriate of fasting and reflection and tshuva. Not so when it comes to the passing of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon himself directed and requested that the day be celebrated. And the reason is because today is a day that light filled the world, which the world had never seen beforehand. It is a day connected to revelation and to divine holiness and truth that has never existed. Therefore, he made this request that this day be a day of holiness. For this reason, one of the symbols of the day is bonfires. You go throughout Israel, really everywhere, but in Israel for sure, the bonfires. Why? Because it's light. They're to commemorate the events of this day. I mean, to some degree, you can say that whenever a tzaddik passes away, whenever a holy person passes away, there's a certain beauty to what's taking place. It's painful, but when a holy person passes away, what's actually happening? Their soul is returning to God, and it's returning having completed their task beautifully to perfection here on earth. What could be better than returning home with having fulfilled one's task and one's purpose here on earth? But that's true about all tzaddik. So that concept is true about all righteous people. But nevertheless, there's a sense that yes, for the tzaddik, for the holy person themselves, there's a certain beauty to this day. It's the day in which they get to return to God with an unblemished soul, with a clean slate, and say, God, I've done what you've asked of me, and now I'm ready to return home. There's something beautiful about that for the tzaddik, but for the rest of us, we're left empty. We're left with a great vacuum, with a vacancy, of a void of someone who was a source of light to all of us. So therefore, for other tzaddikim, it's beautiful for them, but it's painful for us. But for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, because the last day of his life, that day that he passed, was a day in which he brought to the world light and beauty and holiness, much of which we continue to have by virtue of the Zohar and the Hasidic teachings we talk about. Many of us study Hasidus and Tanya and all the mystical teachings we have, starting to Baal Shem Tov. Much of it began on this day, on the day that Rabbi Shneur Bar Yochai passed away. And that's why this day is celebrated with bonfires, with light, because it's all part of the idea that the day Rabbi Shimon passed away was a day of light, a day of revelation, a day of divinity, unparalleled throughout his time. And that gives us a little bit of an explanation as to what makes this day so festive. Now, for many years, this concept wasn't well known. So Lag BaOmer was celebrated, but in a muted way. People said it's because Rabbi Akiva's students stopped dying. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, there was a tradition of Shimon Bar Yochai passed away, but it wasn't really appreciated until the Arizal. The Arizal lived about 500 years ago, who then was another one of the great pillars of light, of mystical light that the world has ever seen. And the Arizal brought to the forefront of our attention and shared with us the true meaning of this day, and shared with us the great festivity and the holiness and the divinity and the opportunity that this day provides. and then followed by the Baal Shem Tov and the students of the Baal Shem Tov. And that's when it gained a lot more momentum, because when the Arizal, who was again a pivotal point in the revelation of the secrets of Torah, the Arizal was the one who taught us the power of this day, we began to appreciate it more, and many of the traditions we have gained much more momentum at that time. So this gives us a little bit of a taste into what makes tonight and tomorrow so special. Again, I encourage everyone to, wherever you're at, if you're in Israel, if you're going to Meron, that's great. If you're in Israel, wherever you may be around the world, to try to gather with friends, share with them a little bit of the beauty of the power of this day. Take it as an opportunity to bless one another, to request blessing, and to bless each other. And God willing, those prayers will be answered. And as we say, the zchus, the merit of the great Tanur of Shimon, should stand for all of us, bring light to the world, the light of Mashiach to the world, and the salvation for us all. Stop here. I'll pause the report, the recording. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take them.